The original Mirror's Edge that came out in 2008 is one of my favorite games of all time. Unfortunately, with a few flaws, mainly because it was so short, it never sold quite well, and therefore it had always been a question whether a sequel would eventually still happen. Now you can imagine my happiness when DICE finally announced Mirror's Edge Catalyst, a reboot of the series that seemed to be doing everything right where the first game went wrong. Now that I've completely beaten the game, do these promises hold up? Not entirely. The game shines in some aspects but underperforms in others. Regardless of all that, I've had a lot of fun. Mirror's Edge Catalyst tells the origin story of Faith Connors, a young woman who just got out of juvie and is introduced back to a team of runners. In the oppressed society the game takes place in, runners deliver all kinds of messages and packages that need to be kept secret from the government. A big criticism of the first game was its lackluster story, and DICE tried their best to improve on that, but the result is a story that still isn't gripping in any way. Cutscenes have been added and the game contains a lot more characters, but they don't come across as likable or people you actually root for. Everything feels rather one-dimensional, and I couldn't help but feel a little weirded out at some of the event twists in the game. A part of what I always liked so much of the original was the mystery and the fact that it left many things unexplained. Catalyst, however, takes the approach to explain pretty much everything, resulting in a much more generic feeling story that's even less interesting and intriguing. I was, however, very surprised that some of these story missions introduced pretty big and fun set pieces that made those specific parts a lot more enjoyable, but the story is simply not why I'll be playing this game.
I understand your frustration, I really do. Faith does that to people.
Taking the series into a completely new direction, Mirror's Edge Catalyst places you in the middle of a giant city of glass with full open world gameplay. Not only that, it also targets a 60 frames per second refresh rate on PC and consoles to have everyone experience its smooth gameplay the way it is intended to be. Though it is then to be expected that the game doesn't quite look as good as other games can look, it's still very impressive in scale. Texture quality is low when you really focus on it, and the frame rate does dip quite often, but when you're simply running through the remarkably big open world like you're supposed to do, it's a very pretty game. I was especially surprised with the amount of secret corridors and passageways that help make the environment seem much more dynamic and fun to explore, contrary to most open world games that only seem to care about the size of its world rather than the actual layout. The reason many people love the original Mirror's Edge so much is of course for its unique first-person gameplay, and this is exactly where Catalyst still shines in every single way. Using the shoulder buttons to jump, climb, slide and roll through the environment is such a breath of fresh air from all the other first-person games out there that even in this second entry now, it still felt unique. Newcomers will find themselves putting lots of effort into trying to get better, but once you actually master all the mechanics, it is just so much fun to play. DICE has now equipped Faith with a grappling hook, and where at first I thought it would heavily impact the traditional gameplay, I later realized you only use it at specific points, and the rush of adrenaline you get when using it made it a great addition. The skill tree, where you'll find yourself unlocking some of the core movement skills like rolling and coil jumping, felt a little unneeded, but most of the necessary upgrades are obtained within the first few hours of playing. The biggest problem with the gameplay is easily the combat. When you're trying to keep up momentum and punch or kick guards as you run past them, it feels very satisfying, but sometimes you're just placed in these rooms surrounded by a bunch of them, and that's where it starts feeling really clunky. Last but most important of all, of course, the game takes place in an open world. Using this approach, the developers were able to answer the biggest criticism of the original game by adding lots of content that increases the replay value. When you're done with the story, you can go and disable security hubs filled with guards, take on opportunity missions that involve bringing packages from one place to the other, hack billboards where you're trying to find ways up to a certain tower, find grid leaks, recordings, documents and lots more. Time trials are back, and I've already found myself putting hours into a few of them, trying to get some of the best times in the world. Now there are two ways to look at this decision. On one hand, it makes the entire game feel a little more generic, with it clearly taking cues from traditional open world games out there. On the other hand, it only extends the amount of time you'll be putting into it, and it has resulted in my overall gameplay time being over 30 hours right now, easily outdoing how long you would be playing the original. In the end, that's the inner struggle I'm currently having with Mirror's Edge Catalyst. As a massive fan, at first I felt slightly disappointed because of the disjointed story and loss of that unique, mysterious vibe, but fast forward a few weeks later and I've been absolutely hooked to the game. What it comes down to is that this is some of the most fun I've had with a video game in years, and I think that's what it's all about. As hardcore fans, it's ultimately that gameplay that we love so much, and we got lots of it in this new entry. To people that have never experienced the first Mirror's Edge, I say definitely give it a try. Free running on the rooftops with Faith has never felt better. Mirror's Edge Catalyst gets an 8 out of 10.